May God bless your day and the week ahead of you. Imagine just standing on the edge of a literally scorching desert that you've been wandering around in for, what, 38 years?
Yeah, nearly 4 decades.
Right, so your sandals are worn out, you are completely exhausted, and you finally get the divine order to march toward the land you were promised.
It's the moment they've been waiting for.
Exactly. But your first command isn't actually to conquer anything. Your first command is to, like, pull out your wallet and politely pay your historic rivals for a glass of tap water.
It's wild.
It really is. So, welcome to our deep dive. Today, we are taking the brilliant notes and commentary from a Holman Study Bible and the NAA Study Bible to unpack Deuteronomy chapter 2.
Yeah, we're looking at some heavy stuff today.
We really are. We're getting into ancient borders, displaced giants, and the honestly terrifying concept of hardened hearts.
Yeah. It really is. Like a masterclass in ancient geopolitics and divine providence. But to make sense of that first command, having to actually pay for water, we really have to look at the psychological state of the Israelites right at this exact moment.
Oh, for sure.
Because they have been in this massive holding pattern for almost 40 years.
Yeah, the text specifically mentions Kadesh Barnea. And it's been 38 years since they left that specific spot. Which, that is not just a long camping trip.
No, not at all.
That duration is a very specific, very somber penalty. They were basically just waiting for an entire generation of fighting men to die off in the wilderness, exactly as God swore would happen after they rebelled earlier.
Right. The desert essentially just consumed the generation that doubted. So you have this entire population that is, carrying the immense grief of literally burying their parents and grandparents in the sand.
Every single day was a reminder of that failure.
Exactly. And now, finally, they're rounding Mount Seir. And the holding pattern is suddenly lifted. God basically tells them, you have been going around this mountain country long enough. It is time to turn north.
The tension there must have been absolutely incredible. You finally get the green light. You have this massive group of people, and you are just ready to move.
Yeah, they're mobilized.
But then God immediately hands them this bizarrely strict set of rules of engagement. Because they're marching north, which means they are passing straight through the territory of Esau, the Edomites in Seir, and the descendants of Lot, which includes Moab and Ammon.
And rather than just unleashing them to, take whatever they need for survival, God explicitly forbids them from attacking or even provoking these nations.
Wow.
The mandate is just absolute restraint, and the theological reasoning here completely upends the normal rules of ancient warfare.
How so?
Well, God states that he has already given those specific lands to Esau and Lot as an inheritance.
Oh, I see. So the territory is already spoken for by divine decree.
Exactly.
Okay, let's unpack this for the listener. Because imagine you've been on this grueling, multi-decade family road trip.
A very long road trip.
Right. You are traveling with a couple million of your closest relatives. You are utterly exhausted.
Yeah.
And you're finally making real progress.
Yeah.
But your dad pulls you aside and says, hey, when we drive past your estranged cousin's estate, you are going to be perfectly polite. You will not touch a single apple on their trees. And if you want to drink from their hose, you will actually hand them cash.
It's a great analogy.
It just feels incredibly counterintuitive, especially when you have the sheer numbers to just overwhelm them.
It really does. And the text drives that exact point home. They are commanded to buy food and water with their own silver. But what is truly fascinating is the rationale God provides in the very next breath.
Which is what?
He doesn't say pay them because their army is bigger than yours.
Right.
He says pay them because the Lord your God has blessed you in all the work of your hands. He says that for these 40 years, the Lord was with them and they lacked absolutely nothing.
Oh, wow. So buying the water isn't an admission of weakness at all.
Not at all.
It's actually a bizarre flex of divine provision. Like, God is essentially saying, you don't need to loot these people to survive because I am the one keeping you alive.
That's it, exactly. And the NAA study notes emphasize that respecting these specific family boundaries, because remember, Esau is Jacob's brother and Lot is Abraham's nephew. This was a profound test of trust for Israel.
A test of discipline, really.
Yeah. Like, do they actually believe God will continue to provide for them, even if they play by these highly restrictive, kind of humiliating rules? They are being asked to act like wealthy tourists passing through, rather than this desperate wandering horde.
Which is asking a lot of people who've been homeless for 40 years.
Oh, definitely.
Just completely redefines the whole concept of land ownership in the ancient Near East.
Yeah.
It's not just about who has the sharpest swords. It's about God's sovereign distribution of the map.
Yes, he gave Esau a mountain. He gave Lot a territory. And Israel just has to respect that.
Which actually brings up a really strange pivot in the text. Because we go from who Israel is supposed to avoid to this sudden, highly detailed history lesson about the monsters those nations had to fight to get that land in the first place.
Yeah, the narrative just abruptly pauses the travel itinerary. It dives into this ancient encyclopedia of the previous inhabitants of these regions. And the defining characteristic of these displaced people is their sheer size and terror.
Honestly, it reads like a fantasy novel.
It does.
The text lists the Imim, who are described as this great and numerous people as tall as the Anakim, who are, a famous ancient race of giants.
Right.
And then you have the Horites, who were destroyed by Esau's descendants. The Zamzummim, which is just a great name, but they were another massive, giant-like civilization that Ammon displaced.
And the scholarly notes also highlight the mention of the Caphtorim here. The text points out that the Caphtorim came from Caphtor, which historical evidence links to Crete, and they destroyed the Avim in Gaza to settle there.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, though, and I have to push back on this tangent.
Sure.
I mean, I totally understand why biblical scholars love that verse. The Holman notes mention that it proves the early existence of the Philistines in Gaza, which validates secular timelines. And that's great, right? Like, great for a history exam.
Right. It's good archaeological validation.
But Moses completely pauses his travelogue to give us an encyclopedia entry on ancient giants and who conquered whom. If I am an Israelite standing in the dust, preparing to march toward Canaan, why do I care about ancient Cretan migration patterns? What does this matter to the Israelites right now?
Well, synthesizing the historical context from both study Bibles reveals this massive aha moment.
Okay, lay it on me.
It paints a picture of a God who is operating on a global chessboard, not just a local one. Moses is basically telling the people that God isn't just the God of Israel. He is the God who orchestrates the rise and fall of giant civilizations everywhere.
Oh, wow. So if God could dispossess giant, terrifying nations to give inheritances to Esau and Lot, he can certainly do the exact same thing for Israel.
Exactly. Consider the massive trauma of that previous generation. I mean, why were they stuck in the desert for 38 years in the first place?
Because of the spies, right?
Yes. When they first spied out the Promised Land, they saw the Anakim, the giants, and they suffered a total catastrophic collapse of faith. They just believed the inhabitants were way too big, the walls were too high, and God wasn't strong enough.
And now, the children of that failed generation are standing at the exact same border.
Right. And Moses is basically pointing to the neighboring countries and saying, look at your cousins. They already faced the monsters under the bed, and God helped them win.
That is profound, ancient encouragement. It turns this terrifying unknown future into a proven historical precedent.
The text is meticulously dismantling their inherited fear. The NVA notes explicitly state this section is crafted specifically to encourage Israel. God is demonstrating that imposing enemies are completely irrelevant when he has decreed an inheritance.
Size and strength mean nothing.
Right. Human historical dominance means absolutely nothing against divine will.
But of course, that encouragement gets put to the test almost immediately.
Always does.
Right. So the polite, peaceful pass-through with the extended family ends. Israel arrives at the Arnon Gorge. And this is the border of the Amorites, ruled by King Sechon of Heshbon.
A totally different situation.
Yeah, God tells Israel that the holding pattern is officially over, and it's time to begin the actual conquest.
But the strategy Israel employs first is entirely diplomatic.
Yeah.
Moses doesn't just send an army charging across the gorge. He actually sends messengers with words of peace.
He offers Sihon the exact same deal they gave to Edom and Moab. Moses essentially says, hey, let us walk up the main road. We won't veer off into your fields. We'll buy our food with silver, and we'll buy our water with silver. Just let us pass through on foot.
It is an incredibly generous offer, especially for a nation that has just been divinely authorized to conquer that exact territory.
But Sihon refuses.
He does. He mobilizes his entire army to block Israel.
And the reason for his refusal is where the theology gets deeply, deeply uncomfortable.
It really does.
Because the text doesn't say Sihon evaluated his military strength and made a tactical decision. It says he refused because the Lord God hardened his spirit and made his heart obstinate.
And that phrasing demands really careful analysis. When we look at the study notes from both the Holman and NAA Bibles, they immediately draw a parallel to one of the most famous figures in the Old Testament.
Pharaoh.
Exactly, Pharaoh during the Exodus.
But that raises a massive theological friction point.
Right.
I mean, Moses actively offers a legitimate peace treaty while God is actively altering Sihon's mind to ensure he rejects it, which guarantees a war.
Right.
Isn't that just a massive contradiction? It feels like divine entrapment.
It's a very common reaction because it introduces this profound philosophical tension regarding free will and divine sovereignty.
Totally.
However, the theological framework provided by the scholars really clarifies this. This isn't a case of God, puppet mastering an innocent, peace-loving king into suddenly becoming a warmonger.
Right.
The concept of God hardening a heart in these ancient texts operates on the premise of pre-existing human stubbornness.
Okay, so Sihon was already hostile.
Very much so. Sihon was an entrenched, unrepentant ruler of a society that was already deeply hostile to Israel and to God's purposes. So the divine action of hardening his spirit is understood as God basically confirming and accelerating Sihon's own obstinate trajectory.
He's giving him over to his own decisions.
Yes. God locks Sihon into the consequences of his own hostility, which forces the situation to a definitive climax.
So it's kind of like removing the brakes from a car that the driver is already intentionally steering down a mountain.
That's a really good way to put it.
It just ensures the crash happens exactly when and where God intends it for judgment.
That captures the biblical mechanism perfectly. God uses the king's inherent wickedness as the very instrument of his own downfall. And he aligns it with the exact moment Israel needs to begin their occupation of the land.
It's a terrifying display of sovereignty.
It truly is.
And the aftermath of that is absolute devastation. Sihon marches out to a place called Jahaz, and Israel completely shatters his forces.
Yeah.
The text says the Lord delivered him over to them, and they capture every single city from Aror, which is on the edge of the Arnon Valley, all the way to Gilead.
And the narrative emphasizes that not a single city was too fortified for them.
None of them.
Right. All those high walls and imposing armies that terrified their parents 38 years earlier, they proved to be entirely hollow when God orchestrated the battle.
But, and this is crucial to discuss, the victory isn't just a military defeat, it is a total eradication.
Yes.
The text states they completely destroyed every city, men, women, and children. They left no survivors. They only kept the livestock and the physical plunder. And this practice, in the historical context, is known as the harem, or the ban.
Yeah. And this concept is undeniably one of the most jarring and frankly difficult aspects of the ancient biblical text for a modern reader to process.
Absolutely.
Which is why it is so crucial to examine the ancient theological context that the study Bibles provide, rather than filtering it solely through a modern geopolitical lens.
Right, because we are looking at how the ancient text itself justifies and understands this level of totality. It's not described as a spontaneous war crime or troops just losing control.
No, not at all. The Holman notes are very clear on this context. The total destruction was a severely regulated, divinely authorized mandate. Within the narrative itself, it is framed entirely as an act of divine judgment.
Judgment against the Amorite society specifically.
Yes. The text views the Amorites as an irremediably unrepentant culture. Their religious and social practices were fundamentally abhorrent to God's standards. So the harem was the execution of a long-delayed absolute judgment against that specific society at that specific time.
But the notes also tie this total destruction directly to the future survival of Israel, don't they?
They do.
Because there is a deeply pragmatic, albeit severe, spiritual reason given for leaving no survivors.
And that reason centers entirely on the concept of religious syncretism.
Which is the blending of different religious beliefs.
Exactly. Syncretism is mixing beliefs and practices. And in the ancient Near East, you have to remember, religion wasn't just a private belief.
Right, it was everything.
It dictated morality, law, economics, social behavior, much of which, in Canaanite culture, involved incredibly dark practices. We're talking about things like child sacrifice and cultic prostitution.
So if Israel conquered the land, but assimilated the people, the theological fear was that they would adopt those practices.
And according to the notes, it was a certainty, not just a fear. The mandate was designed to completely eliminate the cancer of idolatry before Israel could be infected by it.
Wow.
The text views this severe action as basically a radical amputation. It was required to preserve the spiritual purity and covenant fidelity of God's people.
Because if they compromise.
If they compromised and allowed the populations to remain, they would inevitably intermarry, adopt those corrupt practices, and ultimately they would face that exact same divine judgment themselves.
Which is exactly what happens later in their history.
Right.
It is a heavy, chilling reality of the ancient world. And it really strips away any romanticized version of the conquest of Canaan. It shows a God who is terrifyingly absolute in his demands for purity and his execution of justice.
The entire chapter operates on a scale that just forces the reader to confront God's ultimate authority over human history.
Yeah.
I mean, he dictates when a nation waits in the desert for 38 years. He dictates when an army must buy its own water to respect a rival's border. And he dictates when a fortified city falls into total ruin.
It fundamentally changes how you view a map, really. The ancient world didn't see borders as just, lines drawn by politicians or rivers cutting through valleys. They saw them as divine assignments.
Exactly.
They saw the movement of peoples, from the Philistines leaving Crete to the Edomites crushing giants, as the sovereign hand of God preparing the board.
Which leaves us with a really profound question, I think, about how we interact with the boundaries and obstacles in our own lives.
Yeah, because we saw Israel commanded to exercise complete absolute restraint in one breath, and then total uncompromising confrontation to the next.
It's a huge contrast.
And that is the exact thought we want to leave you with today to mull over. We all face barriers, rivalries, and deeply entrenched obstacles in our lives. So, looking at the ancient wisdom of this text, how do you discern which boundaries you are meant to peacefully walk past, even if it costs you your own silver, and which obstacles you are meant to decisively confront?
Because the wisdom is really in knowing the difference between a divine boundary meant for your discipline and an obstacle meant for your victory.
An incredibly powerful concept to explore on your own. Thank you so much for joining us as we unpack the weight and the wonder of these ancient texts in this deep dive. God blesses all the listeners. We will catch you next time.